Okay, first of all, I want to thank everyone for coming here today. I am joined by Senator Summers, who is the co-chair of Public Health, and I know that Senator Logan will be making his way here. Carrie World and her family are behind me, and we'll get to that a little bit later. In the recent months, you've read various articles about the issue of inmate care for our inmates by the Yukon Health Correctional Management Healthcare Unit. And what we've heard about is a lot of issues with respect to care for inmates in the institution. You know, you got to remember that these inmates have no choice. They don't get an option of who they're going to see. They don't get an option of what doctor they're going to visit. And therefore, the responsibility of the state is heightened by virtue of the fact that we are the monopoly with respect to the health care. And what we've seen are some reports that have come out that have raised concerns about the health care in these systems. Today, we're asking lawmakers in this building to call for a public hearing in front of the Public Health Committee to have full transparency with respect to the health care in our prison system. In particular, there was a report done by the Department of Corrections in which it reviewed the 25 cases, including 8 deaths related to the health care. 8 deaths of prisoners in our custody. The DOC has not provided the report. The commissioner, I've talked to him on the phone. He was kind enough to give me a letter to indicate that there's attorney-client privilege. The issue that we're asking is, we need transparency of government. How can the legislature fix a problem they don't know about? How can the legislature say this problem is either a legal problem that we have to fix a statute, or it's a problem with money? We don't know. And I understand, being a lawyer, releasing the report has implications with respect to lawsuits. But our job is, we're government. We're not a business. We're government. We should have transparency. We should know what's happening with the people we're incarcerating. We have that responsibility when we put them into a prison, that we are going to take care of their needs, and that is our responsibility. We cannot delegate it to anyone else. So we are accountable, and that information should be disclosed. That information needs to be disclosed, and this building and the lawmakers in it who are in care and custody of the health of the prisoners in our system need to respond accordingly. Now, when you look at the report, you're looking at it kind of objectively, or sort of a 10,000-foot, another report with respect to state government. But today I am joined by Cassie World, who is the mother of Wayne. And Mrs. World will tell you a little bit about experience with her son. I might add that Mrs. World's husband was an employee of the state of Connecticut, died some time ago. And I'll let her talk about the real life implications of what's happened to her son. Mrs. World.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Carrie Worrell, and this is a little difficult for me because my husband, Wallace Worrell, was a dedicated state employee who was a janitor in this very building for many years. And 10 years ago this month, he had a heart attack on the job, serving the people of the state of Connecticut. Yet I stand here today not to celebrate my husband, but because the state correctional system has failed our son. Wayne Worrell. Wayne Worrell's inmate number 277511, and he has been in jail since 2006 on a manslaughter conviction. Wallace and I raised Wayne to face the consequences of his action. But in serving his time, Wayne has been given a second sentence of inadequate medical care that could cost him his life. In 2012, Wayne began to develop a rash that was ignored and mistreated despite Wayne's regular requests for care. When I would visit him, his entire body would be wrapped in gauze and he could barely walk because of skin lesions. By the time the prison doctor biopsied and diagnosed Wayne in December of 2015, his skin cancer had gotten into his lymph nodes. My son may not live to see his freedom because prison authorities fail repeatedly to give him health care. I know Wayne asked again and again for care and was denied time after time. At one point, Wayne did not even receive his medication for 5 months. My son may not, I had to fight constantly with the Department of Corrections to get any information on his treatment. Yet his conditions continued to get worse. Between June 2014 and September 2015, I contacted the DOC more than 20 times advocating for my son to receive a biopsy and the appropriate care. I have watched my son suffer needlessly under what I see is a cruel and careless prison administration. I hope that no other parent or family have to endure what we have had to with this horrible, systematic denial of medical care in prisons. These are human beings and they should be treated as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. World. Not much more I can add to that, except for just a few things I do want to say. First, I want to say I have a great deal of respect for Commissioner Simple. I think he's a great guy. I think that these issues were not necessarily his issues. This is why we have advocated strongly against a no-bid contract for UConn for years. Because when you have a no-bid contract, you have no feedback. Nobody is looking at the results. It's just automatic. The contract would get renewed. So this is something that has gotten out of control, and we as a legislature need to bear the responsibility as much as anybody else in this state. That's why we're asking for these public hearings. And may I say, I'd like to introduce Heather Summers, who's the co-chair of the Public Health Committee, to say a few words. Heather?
Yes. Good afternoon. Over the last year, our state was shocked to hear about the horrible abuses at Whiting that everyone in this room is probably all too familiar with. And as co-chair of Public Health, we pushed to have a public hearing concerning those abuses and outrages that we all learned about. And I can attest to our committee's effort to shine a light on these horrendous actions so that our state can move forward in a positive manner and implement policies that will prevent this horrible situation from ever happening again. Now to learn of another systematic failure and part of our government here is just highly disturbing, and it echoes what we've experienced with Whiting. It deserves the full attention of the state legislature. Just as lawmakers have worked together in a bipartisan manner to address the Whiting issues, we must now also address the UConn health failures. It's my hope that the Public Health Committee will play an important role in uncovering exactly what happened, the facts, just as we have with Whiting, and find a way to move forward. While Governor Malloy last week just touted his new policies to enhance the treatment of women in prison by doing such things as providing women with female inmates with feminine hygiene products at no cost, there's clearly much, much deeper problems in the correction system that we cannot overlook. These are problems of life, and now we're hearing possibly death. Problems that demand our undivided attention in a bipartisan manner. It is also very concerning for me, especially being a new legislator, that for years the state has blindly awarded a no-bid contract to UConn as a subsidy in some cases for UConn, with no effective oversight and unsuccessful self-policing. The organization's failures have already caused great harm to individuals and potentially death. The legislature is now obligated to step up and speak up for those who have suffered from these most inhumane conditions. The idea that someone can go for 5 months without medication is just outrageous and unacceptable. We need to know the full story so that we can determine the best course of action to prevent this or anything like this ever happening again in the state of Connecticut. This is allegedly, in some instances, would be considered torturous neglect, and we have to prevent it from ever happening again. Thank you. I'd like to now introduce Senator Logan, who's my co-chair of Public Health.
Thank you, Senator Summers. Appreciate that. And my comments will be brief. But I, too, am outraged by this. I want to echo the calls for transparency that my colleagues have pointed out. I also want to remind the public that these system failures have been documented by the state auditors in a 2017 report. According to that report, Yukon Health's Correctional Managed Healthcare Unit operated with substandard quality controls, and their self-policing failed to bring the truth to light for many years. As a result, taxpayers have been paying for an expensive contract subsidizing Yukon Health, which has failed to provide the basic standard of care and decency that every human being has a right to receive. The reported inhumane treatment of people cannot be swept under the rug. It needs a full hearing so that we can understand how on earth our state failed to provide basic medical attention, and so that we can all work together to determine the best way to ensure something like what happened to Mr. World suffered never happens to any person again. Thank you.
As a final note, in that transparency for the public hearing, the requirement of having the two reports, one report which was $63,000, which was report on the 25 inmates in particular being analyzed, and then there was a $630,000 report that was a report done by DOC to look at ongoing safety issues and things that can be done. I think the process for going forward needs the transparency of those reports so we can deal with it. This is not a small issue. This is a critical issue in this building. And this is about morals. And this is about us as legislators standing up and doing the right thing. With that, I don't know if there's any questions.
Where are your Democratic colleagues in the Black and Puerto Rican caucus?
So I have reached out to the Black and Latino caucus, Puerto Rican caucus. I think last week we had a meeting, maybe it was a week before. We had an in-depth conversation. I know that their platform they rolled out included this as one of the items. Indicated to them that we've been following this.
Also, I'd like to mention that I am a member of the Black and Puerto Rican caucus.
That's true.
Too.
I asked them if they wanted to be here today. They indicated that they're very interested in this issue. They knew that we have been writing back and forth to try to get answers. They want to work with us, and I think after today, you're going to see a hand-holding going forward to press for this hearing. And I know Senator Summers, who's been very much involved in making sure that people who are in our institutions receive the best care. She's been a strong advocate, will not stop at Whiting, and will make sure that we have this hearing on this issue.
So you're advocating for the release of these documents even if it exposes the state to liability?
Yeah, I'm saying that, look, we are the government. Who are we to withhold documents from the legislature if we want them? That's fundamentally wrong. I understand, and I can't, from a reporter who called me on this a week ago, and I might have read it in another article, that even the state's auditors have asked for these reports so that they can make sure that it is done correctly, and they can't get it. That's appalling to me. I'm sorry. Look, there is a liability. As I said, as a lawyer, I understand, and I understand it wasn't, I've been away from law a little bit being up here, but look, there is an advantage. But we have a greater responsibility to people. And we have a greater responsibility when we put people in our institutions that we as legislators come up here every day and legislate. And I don't think it's appropriate on any level to say we don't want to expose the truth because of liability. If we did something wrong, we fess up and move forward. But how do we correct? How do we know in our hearts of hearts as legislators we're doing the right thing unless we have the facts? Yes, sir?
Do you think DOC has been somewhat insular on this, kind of keeping it in-house? Where, I mean, you've called DCF down here, you've called, and you picked them apart, and they have to explain themselves. There hasn't been a lot of interaction between the lawmakers and the folks at DOC over.
Well, I think that's the public hearings going to do it. My understanding is from the letter that I received from the commissioner that it is counsel that has informed him that the information cannot be disclosed. It's attorney-client. And I think we should have a public hearing and let that be said and let this administration either say, yes, we're going to invoke our attorney-client and that report's not going to see the light of day, or we're going to waive our attorney-client and produce it. I don't think the commissioner has that authority. I think it comes from this administration. And I think we need to know, and if it's the commissioner, then that's where we'll rest. If it's the administration, well, that's where we'll rest. But someone has to stand in front of this committee, have the guts to stand up and say, I am not going to release this report. I'm evoking attorney-client privilege, and you're never going to know the truth of what's happening to the prison inmate health care. And I'm going to say that I think that a mom has a right to know what is going on. And every mother and every son and every daughter of every prisoner in our system needs to know that right of what's happening to their loved one. And we as legislators should demand it.
Does anyone else have to agree before you schedule a hearing, or can you go ahead and schedule that?
We're going to talk to the Democrat. Why don't you speak to that?
The process right now during session is that to have a public hearing, there has to be a bill on the floor to be able to do that. So I plan on going back to my co-chairs. We'll be meeting hopefully tomorrow afternoon and have this conversation.
Is there a bill on the floor right now, or?
No, this is an informational
It'll be
hearing.
an informational hearing.
Yeah, just to figure. Anybody else have anything else?
Does that mean that the hearing would actually have to be held after the session? Or is it-
No, we could do it. We could work our way around it on session, and then if we have to, we'll continue it after this session, whatever it takes.
So during an appropriations hearing, Commissioner Simple said that this document was part of a medical review. If it's part of a medical review, should it be? Is there any precedent for allowing lawmakers to view documents in camera, so to speak, and to be able to make judgments versus the public?
The answer to the in-camera review is I don't know. I think that once we set our eyes on a document, it's probably FOIable. I don't know of an exclusion. I will look at that issue. It's an interesting issue. But I think once we have the document, it's subject to FOI. And I think that's the concern here. And I get it. But I think when DECD gets asked for a document because some business came in, they say that's proprietary information. We're telling you what it says on a 10,000-foot level, but the actual mechanics of it is proprietary. And I would argue, okay, I kind of get that. But when you're dealing with healthcare in a prison system where there's a track record of deaths and injury that seems to give a notion to the fact that we need to change, I think that's a legislative function as much as anything else. We carry that burden as much as anybody else does. Any other? Yes, sir.
Are you already convinced that there is substandard care in the health system or in the correctional health system, or?
Yeah, I think there are reports out there that do suggest that the system is not working. I think Commissioner Simple is now on a track that UConn is out to develop a different system by bringing in other community providers, and I think he's looking at what other states have done. And he did not have that ability because every year we had a no-bid contract come in. And UConn now has stepped away from it, which now has opened that door. So I think he's looking at that. But I think there's plenty of documents already to suggest that they're not getting adequate care. And I certainly would suggest 8 deaths is the most important factor to suggest. And Mrs. World's testimony as to her son, who had a rash since 2012, and it wasn't until 2015 that the rash bled through a gauze, did someone all of a sudden say, I think this needs a little bit more of attention. That is striking to me and staggering to me. Any other questions?
Do you feel that the attorney-client privilege claim is legitimate and it needs to be waived, or that it's not a legitimate claim?
I have not researched the issue, but I know attorney-client privilege does exist. I will tell you that in some cases, leaders are briefed on, the Attorney General will come in and brief us on ongoing litigation and brief us as to facts, tell us where we stand, give us a verbal indication of strength and weaknesses or things we have to do or not do. I have not received any of that from anybody so far, but I believe the attorney-client privilege is a well-founded position. I just suggest that in this particular instance, given this particular issue and the lives that are entrusted to us, it should be waived. Anybody else?
On a different topic, any update on when there might be a Senate vote on Justice O'Connor?
Talking to Senator Looney, I know it's not going to be next week because of a scheduling problem. That vote will probably take place the week after. I don't know if it's going to be on Monday or Wednesday. Senator Looney hasn't talked to me about any dates at this time. All right, thank you all for coming. Thank you.